Suncor, it's Total, which is the largest energy company out of France, Statoil out of Norway, Nexen, which is another strong Canadian presence, and ConocoPhillips. So when ConocoPhillips, Nexen, Total, and Suncor, and Statoil get together, you see this is really an international alliance to develop the oil sands. And it sets us apart from some of our homegrown people who, anytime my poor friend Ed Stelmach says we should be more responsible in the management, start beating up on him. We really have to start giving our government the courage of our convictions in keeping with our values, but more so, as the new Alberta Technology Alliance, one of the first things your board might want to do is get hold of the Ausley board and say, you're folks who have committed to adapting technology, we're folks who have the technology to offer, we all want stewardship and a transition to a sustainable clean energy economy. How can we work together? How can we set up a regular forum so that we exchange new ideas and best practices? And how basically do we get a Made in Alberta clearinghouse followed by what Russ might call a Made in Alberta deal generator to bridge that, to solidify that alliance between responsible and ethical energy companies and the clean tech sector in Alberta. I think that is going to be a tremendously exciting opportunity, and if some of you have wished, if I only had $20 million, I could make it come true, well, that if only may become when I have $20 million, I will make it come true. Now, the reason we need to take leadership is that while most people feel that Alberta's oil sands are really important to us, not that many people believe the government is responsibly managing it. And this isn't entirely the government's fault. We've sort of let the government twist in the wind. We've allowed the surly tenants to call the shots, to dictate to us what kind of stuff we get. We've allowed ourselves to be convinced that just touching the oil industry in any way is going to invite catastrophe. And as a result, our share of what we own, measured not by royalties alone, not by taxes alone, but as a total government share of the resource we own, is the lowest in the world. Absolutely the lowest in the world. I have three good friends, Evan Krapko, Andre Plourde, and Bill Hunter, who served as volunteers on the Alberta Royalty Review Panel. The modest increases they proposed would have taken Alberta to the second lowest take in the world, barely ahead of Britain, which charges low royalties on its North Sea resource, which is declining. And Bill and the boys sure got beat up real hard by the oil crowd. And then when the government went in and tried to implement even half of what Bill had recommended, they got beat up some more and they got bludgeoned, and they sort of backed down. It's really unfortunate we Albertans didn't step up to the plate and say, as owners, this is the minimum take and the minimum return we want. So that's how we got there. And in this, the leadership has to begin in the mirror. You are part of the solution to Alberta's future prosperity. You are the solution to Alberta's sustained and ongoing prosperity. Never let go of that. Don't get knocked off the puck and keep on going. Now, part of the management problem comes from citizens feeling disconnected. These are all results from our values mapping. They believe they have no influence on the government. They feel government isn't listening to them. That disconnect can only be solved by individual citizens and groups of citizens reconnecting with your elected representatives, reconnecting with your ministers, and actually showing up to vote. Only 40% of Albertans showed up to vote in the last provincial election. And that's really a level of disengagement from the political process that's not healthy for any democracy. But also, as leaders now of the clean tech future of Alberta, it gives you an amazing opportunity to draft a policy agenda. Maybe you should get together and have a policy charter out of all those recommendations that you came. Go and sift through them. Find 5 thematic areas that are your top priorities. Have them aligned with the values of Albertans and start the conversation along those lines. I'm going to have a few suggestions on that in a couple of minutes. Now, this is my faith in you. My book actually has a question mark at the end. Clean energy for the 21st century. And my definition of green oil is oil sands production that has a lower carbon footprint than conventional oil right now. The Pembina Institute told us 3 years ago that we can get there in 20 years if we take certain regulatory measures and make certain investments. Now that you are an alliance, you are going to get us there. Make that your mission. Make that your goal as Albertans. Make that your goal as entrepreneurs and tech startups. We will build and design the clean energy future. And why us? Because our unique value proposition is the world's largest hydrocarbon deposit. It can make combustible fossil fuels that produce carbon. It can also make hydrogen. It is adaptable to many different uses, but it's the only such resource in the democratic world. And let me remind you of how big. That is the Alberta oil that's recoverable by today's technology in a sustainable manner. The technology improves every year. Sometime by 2017, before then, which is Canada's 150th birthday, we will go past Saudi Arabia because we'll be able to book more recoverable. Alberta will become the single largest petrostate in the world. It's 3.8 million of us today. You're the people who can leverage that petroleum wealth into a sustainable future for the planet. I don't mean to sag your shoulders. I want you to lift your shoulders to the opportunity, not have it sag under the burden of this responsibility. But it is absolutely our responsibility as Albertans, because look at the other large oil reservoirs. How many of them are committed to a culture of peace? How many to a culture of democracy? How many to a culture of innovation and fostering excellence? How many to even allowing women to participate in the civic life of the polity? Look at that. It's an absolute waste and absolute tragedy that the world's addictive source of energy consumption is controlled by societies that are committed to the promotion of violence, to the most blatant forms of gender discrimination, and essentially to dehumanizing their human capital. Now think of that against the Canadian gift. We have created a society in the polity where we can unite every stream of the human experience. We find a means of dialogue, of coexistence, not merely to survive, but to live and flourish and create and build and go forward into a better future. And we have the oil wealth to pay for it. That is why the oil sands are a global responsibility, and our stewardship of this resource is a responsibility that we cannot shun. Now let's look at the battleground for the propaganda wars. And the propaganda wars are so dispiriting. When you look at all of those oil reservoirs, when you look at all of that supply, only Canada and Mexico can be classified as friendly oil or familiar oil as opposed to foreign oil. And when you're making your Cleantech arguments, let's calculate the true cost of a barrel of oil. A barrel of Iraqi oil costs $10 billion a month and lost blood and treasure and human lives to secure. Protecting the Saudi oil lanes so that Saudi Arabia can continue to deny women basic human rights, so that its radical preachers can go and fund radical training centers in Waziristan that killed Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan. The cost of protecting the Saudi oil lanes is a U.S. military budget of $700 billion a year. Let's start doing whole cost accounting on the true cost of a barrel of Middle Eastern oil, and then we'll go and talk to the royalty deniers about how expensive it is to produce Alberta oil. How expensive in what terms? It cannot be money alone. It has to be measured on alternatives, on human development, and indeed, as Tom reminded us so eloquently, about the health of the planet. So, our serious conversation with Americans. We got into the environmental mess because you wanted your oil yesterday.